So I talk about this all the time, Game of the Year and how well they actually do, and just overall how they encapsulate basically everything with video games at the time, and they do a fantastic job at that. And so I want to kind of take a stab at ranking all the decisions that have been made from the nominees to Game of the Years, and we can see a lot of older games on this list, which is really good. Some stuff is missing, but hey, when it comes to it, it's okay to miss stuff and not cover everything basically. So we're gonna go into it and we're gonna talk about probably in order. We're not gonna go by year because honestly, I don't really think it matters for how we rank these games. Uh, and we have a bunch of tier lists, which is always a tiers. Sorry, always a fantastic time to have so many different tiers. I guess I would encapsulate that this is kind of like the best of the best here, which I already see quite a few games on here that I think would go up there. But I think we're going to start with Assassin's Creed Odyssey. If you don't know what Assassin's Creed Odyssey is, it's basically, I want to say, the kind of finalization of the RPG combo concept. And it's just really bad. It's one of those things that it just doesn't work out in what they're trying to do. Whereas you look at like Origins, for instance, and there was some misgivings on the system itself, being that it was new, changed to establish the series at that point. But whereas Origins really struggled with the very beginning, Odyssey has the exact opposite problem, where the ending is just really terrible. It really doesn't fit the rest of the narrative going forward. And in fact, I think Odyssey's very strong, like middle section, is what puts it above horrible. This is like it could have been great, is what I always say. Um, Alan Wake 2 is a little different. I like to say it's kind of just bad. When you look at like what is a masterpiece to amazing to even great to very good, you need a lot of stuff going into it that feels like the game is in a great direction. And I've always felt that Alan Wake 2 struggles to really captivate me in any regard. And not only that, I think it's also boring to watch as a video game, which is, the exact opposite of what I want in a game. I want a game that if I have no interest in playing, it's at least enjoyable for somebody else to play, right? To at least watch them and see how they react and how they enjoy it. And Alan Wake 2 just doesn't have any of that, which is really, really terrible. Animal Crossing, this is New Horizons, I believe. It's just decent. It's just flat across the board. It's the Animal Crossing. I do want to say that the worst parts about this game kind of come into the time it released. See, when the big scary word came around, it really just kind of brought forth the worst aspects of Animal Crossing, in that not a lot of people really got into it at the immediates. And it took a while for this to build up, but I do think the game is a solid number to pick up. I haven't played this, sadly. Really terrible. Assassin's Creed 2 is probably one of the best games ever made, hands down. I really feel like the memory sequence right after 10 is just hands down amazing. When it comes to Assassin's Creed, it's really hard to find a better game than Assassin's Creed 2, which is just kind of disappointing because I feel like there was so much potential looking at Assassin's Creed 2's ending that you could have gone into so many different like just originations that I don't really enjoy where it ended up. Uh, it's not specifically like talking about Brotherhood, but I'm talking about Revelations. How Revelations isn't that great of a game, whereas Brotherhood is fantastic. But yeah, that's kind of my point. Assassin's Creed 3, on the other hand, is probably one of the greatest games of all time. When we talk about like great games that warp how we look at video games and the industry itself, uh, I do think Assassin's Creed 3 is definitely up there. From its hunting mechanics that are pretty new to the scene, it's not the newest, I'm not going to give it that, but to just the overall kind of combo of the storytelling into the cutscenes, the camera being fantastic. Honestly, one of the best cameras in 3D space gaming at the time, and heck, it's arguable that it's a really, really fantastic now. And it overall, I think the combat is pretty intuitive, and it has this type of almost like motion that I think flows a lot better than even Assassin's Creed 2, Revelations especially, and even Brotherhood in this regard. I think honestly, Assassin's Creed 3 is fantastic. Of course, Baldur's Gate. We're just gonna say horrible. I really didn't like the story direction of any of it. I felt like the characters were pretty flat, and a lot of the kind of areas were boring. But I mean, it's one of those things where I do think you a lot of people will see quality when there's just zero. Like it's one of those things of we'll talk about a lot of these where there's just people that are looking and forcing quality in their eyes when there's nothing there. There's no good music, there's no good action, there's no good storytelling, there's no good dialogue. The voice acting is terrible. Like and I've just never understood how people can respect this game in any regard. Which goes into Arkham Asylum. This is one of those games that I happen to feel is almost on the same wavelength, but I will give a lot of credit to fighting so many of the same guys to get used to it, to get that Batman. We must prepare to fight the same enemy over and over and over again, which I feel like is core to Batman's like whole entire prepare phase. I think Arkham Asylum is really good at that. Uh, when it comes down to all the characters in the game, I feel uh, like none of them really hit properly. None of them are even close to their comic counterparts or even like the new age counterparts that kind of start forming around that time. I feel like just there's not a lot of staying power for Arkham Asylum, and it's really shitty that gets brought up so much. Which goes in Arkham City. I do think there's a little better of an option here, where I feel like the open world kind of gives a nice little section to kind of go around and enjoy the world you're in, while at the same time having these Riddler trophies, which I didn't even make mention in Arkham Asylum. That's on me. But in Arkham City, I feel like these Riddler trophies are much more put together, and at the same time feel like a challenge, which I was really hoping for in Arkham Asylum's Riddler trophies. But in this regard, I happen to think City does a lot better. I like a lot of the character moments in Arkham City. They don't feel very separated, which was kind of a problem in Asylum. But now we have Bayonetta, which I happen to think is a very decent time. When we look at like Bayonetta, its action sequences are some of the best in the biz. But it's always just going to be not a very likable character is kind of like the namesake here. Bayonetta isn't like very liked, is what I've kind of picked up on. At least that's my stance. That's not to say that it isn't like worth playing. It's just definitely you can skip over it. Bioshock. I happen to think this is one of the worst games on this list. Bioshock 1 has one of the worst, and I do mean worst, monotone storytelling perspectives that on this list. Not only is it like in your face boring, but even the like interesting characters you come across in quote interesting kind of fall to the wayside and don't get their moments or don't get a boss battle that would really make it worthwhile. A lot of the hacking is like the best part, and there's not enough hacking in the game, which is really a big problem because it's the best part of the game and there's just nothing there. Bloodborne is also very similar. In fact, I think this is probably the worst game on this list because Bloodborne establishes like similar to the other Souls games, which we'll talk about. I think it appears a couple times, right? Yep, Sekiro and so on. But we'll talk about the other Souls games and how they really fail to establish like a good combat flow. And I feel like Bloodborne is the biggest problem of all the Souls. It doesn't like have this good combat down. It doesn't feel fast paced enough. It doesn't feel like you ever really are at a disadvantage, or even if you are at a disadvantage in quotes, it feels like you can easily circumvent that to get around a challenge that just isn't worth it. It's like, hey, you wrote your name on top of the piece of paper of homework. Congratulations. Like it Bloodborne is very undeserving of all the praise that it gets. It doesn't deserve it at all. Which also goes into Burnout 3. Burnout 3 is one of those games that I think it definitely shows its age, right? It shows its age around the turn of the PS2 to Xbox 360 era, in that racing games were just not ready. They were not ready to make the transition, and more importantly, the graphics of the older games were falling apart. Like, we haven't seen a very good racing game since the old Flatouts, and it really felt like Burnout 3 was trying to capture something of them and just failed massively. The crashing aspect feels very haphazard and not well put together. The maps and racing that you do in those maps aren't unique, they aren't fun. There's not a lot of just interesting, like, signature takedowns. There's not a lot of cool challenges. Even a lot of the like missions that you go through, I feel like just standard races that could have been done in just a normal open world mode. There's nothing really special about Burnout 3, which is really miserable. Uh, I mean, it's just good. It's more Call of Duty, which at the end of the day, I think uh, really encapsulates just FPS at its core. I really feel like Call of Duty 2, which I'm pretty sure this is, it's not Call of Duty 3. Call of Duty 2 and 3 looked similar to me, which they're both in good if we were to argue. But Call of Duty 2, I feel like encapsulates the evolution of FPS and would start what I like to call the big boom of the new FPS, which, is a valuable like adjective to be a part of. I do think it suffers from uh, just a lot, and I do mean a lot of problematic missions that really just they're yes, I get you want to be verbose and you want to have these great stances of whatever political issue at the time, but I feel like Call of Duty 2's biggest problem is that it's tackling those in a time that nobody cares, and it's just too early for that, which is also why Modern Warfare 2 is problematic, because it tackled these issues, and this is why it's only in bad, by the way, is because it tackled these issues in a time that I think a lot of people need to realize, but it did it in a very poor way. It didn't really showcase the. Uh, Everybody knows the airport scene, I'm guessing. But it didn't really showcase how truly violent and how monstrous that could be, or how this works in the world where such a slaughter can occur. And so I feel like it doesn't encapsulate all that really well. And so it kind of comes off as a little weak in that kind of punchline of showcasing to the player, hey, there's a lot of fucked up shit in the world. Like, focus on it sometimes. I feel like it doesn't get the message across, or at least that's what I get. I also feel like a lot of the, if we're talking about multiplayer, which is when Call of Duty really shot off, I feel like a lot of the maps in Modern Warfare 2 are pretty shit. Uh, it doesn't really get a nice combo of like assault rifle, submachine gun, shotgun. Uh, the best thing in probably Modern Warfare 2 is the riot shield. I feel like it encapsulates this stuff that wasn't really going on in FPSs around the time, is just the ability to kind of block your opponent from playing the game without a insane amount of skill, which I think is really good for an FPS. I think the fact you could actually melee a predator missile and not like die to it if you were good enough is really really cool. Like, that's amazing. Celeste, I think, is some of the weakest platforming you could ever be a part of. When it comes to platformers, we'll talk about a couple of these platformers, but I feel like when it comes to platformers, there's not really a solid one that has come out in recent years. I feel like platforming itself has stayed stagnant for dozens, if not like, what, 30 years. It has really felt like there's been no evolution, no skill increases, and more importantly, no interesting lore around it. I feel like 2D platforming at one point really had this like inherent lore that these developers would put in that would make it worth going around like the level, and oh, there's a little indent, let me search this, or oh, for Mario there's a pipe that leads to an alternate path. And sometimes it was worth it, other times it wasn't, but I feel like it was much more go ahead and explore and have fun, which I feel like Celeste fails at. Call of Duty Black Ops 1 is in a similar boat with Modern Warfare 2. I'm actually going to give Modern Warfare 2 some credit here, but I do think it is really bad. I think I I really want to put in bad, right? Because I think it does have some inherent quality. There's some really cool stuff. But I think multiplayer wise, one, all the maps are very, very not like recognizable. Like if you were to put all the maps in front of somebody who played this game, I doubt you they can name a single one. Which also goes into a problem with the single player. It's very forgettable. It is one of the most forgettable things. There's not a single quote anybody can like speak out and actually have just be matched, which is a huge problem. I feel like when you're talking about FPSs in this regard, you have to go back to Call of Duty 2 or even 3 if it was on this list, which I don't think it is. But Call of Duty 2, it has these moments that I think stand out above the rest of its kind of sometimes lower lows, but Black Ops just has lower lows and there's no high points, there's no realizations, there's no twist ending, there's none of that, which I think really really makes it suffer. Which goes into Control. Control is a very similar kind of mindset to Black Ops, it was trying to do anyway, where it was trying to do some mind games, but I feel like Control actually does a little better in what it's trying to do. I think it's just decent. It's fly across the board. But I think a lot of the psychic shenanigans that happen in Control and the more like puzzle oriented mind games aren't really good. The storytelling is also a little weak at times, and some of the like twists in quote I feel like are just too obvious, which I think is a big problem. I'm trying to stay away from spoilers because I feel like the game has been spoiled way too much. Probably the most spoiled game on this list, honestly. But when it comes down to it, I feel like Control has probably one of the best combats on this list. Um, the only problem I will say, because I did put in decent, is Control's overall like concept has like an inherent flaw where like it just I'm trying to think of how to word this because I don't want to come off as like too harsh, right? I feel like being too harsh on these games is sometimes problematic, but when it comes to Control, I feel like it doesn't establish itself well in its first act, which I think is the biggest problem of it. And that kind of goes into like its core mechanic being not well established immediately, which I think can kind of confuse players. But Doom Eternal, I happen to think Doom has just collapsed. I'm actually gonna put both these here. We'll put it in bad. I do want to give some credit to some of the music selections at least. Um, but it's also a mixed bag, right? Some of the music is just really miserable. And I happen to hate most levels in 2016 Doom, and that also extends to Eternal. A lot of the level design feels very haphazard, doesn't feel like a good flow motion like it was in previous Dooms. It doesn't feel like it's been revitalized. It feels like it's been dug up from a cemetery and just kind of Frankenstein, which can be cool. I do like Frankenstein, but at the end of the day, it's still, a corpse. Uh, yeah. We have more Souls. I think I'm gonna get more coverage in some of the other Souls, but we'll just put this in bad. I think that kind of encapsulates it. Deathloop, I still stand by. I haven't played it. Death Stranding. I think this game as a core concept is probably its biggest flaw. Uh, One of the things I feel like Kojima himself is able to do is kind of establish action as its main storytelling. And I feel like it kind of fails here. And I'm really struggling whether to put in bad and decent because I feel like it's kind of in between, but we'll put in bad. I feel like Death Stranding, as like the clean action game it is, really suffers from just not having good story moments, not having this atmosphere actually matter. It feels very haphazard in that regard, which is very odd. Haven't played Dishonored. Inquisition, I have played a little bit. I feel like I'm not gonna give myself the benefit of that doubt on that one. I've only played like a couple hours of it. That's not enough time to really form an opinion on it. Elden Ring, I understand. I get it. A lot of people really like Elden Ring, but I think the world is inherently weak. I think the open world aspect of this game is the best part of it. I think being able to go around and kind of circumvent a lot of the challenge of the game is just being smart and just being able to do that and like kind of have your second playthrough be the main playthrough you'll remember is amazing. I do think the first moments you end up going through certain areas are very forgettable. I think the first time you end up going and breaking free of the tutorial is super forgettable. You're going to get lost right away. There's no good system to kind of look at where you're going, what you should be doing, which I think is a big problem of this open world. Uh, but at the same time, I think the open world does a good job of making interesting areas that stand out from one to another. I do think there's really bad separation lines in them where certain areas just look like they blur too much, but it's kind of the struggle of open world that I think Elden Ring kind of reached. I do think the combat itself is probably some of the worst that Souls is, but I think it's really saved by the open world. Fallout 3, this is probably in really bad. Uh, Man, it really sucks to say because I had such high hopes for Fallout 3 uh, when I went back and I wanted to play the series, right? My first Fallout game we'll talk about is Fallout 4, which I'm going to get into is actually a decent game. But Fallout 3, when I went back and played it, I wondered where the sprinting mechanic was and how the slow kind of VAT system was kind of just the only way to really enjoy the game. I feel like a lot of the firefights was just VATs, and I just waited around. You couldn't build at all. The perks were very miserable. A lot of the side quests I think were lame as hell too. I think when we talk about Fallout 3 and I think I've mentioned this before to Fallout fans, and they really disagree with me, but I think some of those side quests just really fail and don't feel fulfilling. The horrible aspect of them is like interesting, yes, like the gore and all this, but I don't care about a guy that's mutated to a tree. Like it's very lame, and it feels almost just like a backhand from the developer. I really feel Fallout 3 fails to kind of make me remember anything besides the bad parts. I did like though one of my favorite parts is uh, Broken Steel. I don't like the DLC at all, but when you don't have Broken Steel installed, you get the game ending with, which I think is just perfect. I think it's a great way to end it, and I think if that was the normal thing, if they didn't kind of retcon it with Broken Steel, I really feel that this would be at least in the bad tier. But hey, we get ruined by DLC a lot, so there we go. Fallout 4, I kind of talked about this. I do think it's kind of decent, kind of middle of the road in this way. Uh, it has a lot of qualities I think are very good for the time. I think its sprinting mechanic is very very well done. I think its overall use of power armor kind of makes the game a worthy challenge, right? So you can go without power armor and the game becomes incredibly difficult, or you can go with power armor and becomes much more. You're able to do it. I think the modding system is probably the biggest struggle of this game. I feel like the modding and the building are just they're not finished, or even in this case, I feel like they don't really do anything for you as a player. I didn't really like modding my pistol or shotgun to change how they work. It felt very weak, which goes into fear. I'm sorry, guys. I understand there's a huge group of you, like a huge group, that really loves fear. It's not that interesting. It's not that scary. And more importantly, for the time, it doesn't need a remaster. Stop talking about it. Final Fantasy VII, I think, is probably in the bad tier. This happens to go with, I think the story elements are really shitty. I think Cloud as a character, being the expansive backstory he's given, and also like no like hidden like twist, I guess would be the way to put it. Having no hidden twists with his character, or having no kind of connection to a lot of stuff, is very problematic, and it comes off as like lazy writing. Um, I do want to state that my favorite part of the game personally is the materia system. I think as a whole, it really kind of it kind of puts it together and makes combat enjoyable, which I think is something that should be praised, which is why it's only bad. I haven't played Freedom Fighter, sorry. Gears of War 2, we'll talk about Gears 1 because I think it's probably more important that we establish how bad of a series this is. So, Gears of War 1, and we'll talk about Gears of War 2. So, Gears of War 1 starts off, I think, in the worst way possible by giving this tutorial that you can skip when in reality, I love tutorials that you are forced to play through. When you're able to force through and you have to press every button, you have to go through and explore and understand why you're playing and what you're playing. It's the very most important part of tutorials nowadays, and I feel like Gears of War 1 immediately fails, which goes into one of the worst like foundation acts I've ever seen in a video game. We see very little interesting locales. We're introduced to characters that aren't interesting at all. And when it comes down to the very end of Act 1, which, spoilers, when we get jumped by a new type of enemy, it's so lame. It's so fucking lame that it feels like an insult to the player. This continues on into Act 2, where they try and change up the gameplay and comes out very weak. I do want to say I love the vehicles section. I think the vehicle section with the light turret really sells itself as like kind of how desperate the gas station guy was. I feel like I attached myself to that character more than the actual characters I was playing. And then I could talk more about how the Corpser fight is very lame in Act 3. I could talk about the very end of the game, how its shortness is the greatest aspect of it, but also at the same time, how the final battle feels very just trash. Which goes into Gears 2. Gears 2, you think they would look at what they did really badly, and they would improve upon it, but no. They added more interactive environments, which I think is just kind of lame. It really sucks to have to switch to a weapon just to do something, or if you want to like blow it up, you have to melee it a bunch. I also don't like a lot of the, not, I don't want to say build up, but it's kind of the build up of the middle point of the game, and I think what the game struggles on ultimately is there's not enough interesting lore around why you do stuff. And man, it's really hard because I want to love Gears 2 because I think this is when they really establish like the combat. The slower combat I think feels a lot better, and at the same time, the areas feel like they had potential. I think it's a potential worthy game, is how I see it. I'm gonna take a drink for a second. Sorry about that. Ghost of Tsushima. Part of me wants to say horrible, but we'll put really bad. We'll give it some credit. A lot of it comes to storytelling. How I hate the graphics on this thing. I Ghost of Tsushima gives me so many issues of just like not being a like well looking, good looking game. I just problem. There we go. End of thing. Graphics are the biggest point for me, which is why a lot of these games just kind of fail, and why some unique art styles, we'll talk about them, how they ultimately just fail the landing. I don't care about Ghost Recon like at all. God of War. So we have a lot of God of War to talk about. I think we'll talk about this. So one of the biggest problems that God of War 1 has as a more hack and slash oriented action game is its combat. I feel like it's a little too quick time events. In just general combat, and I feel like the boss battles themselves just don't have enough quick time events. I feel like there's not a lot of separation into both of those styles that they do a good job. And that's basically one of the biggest problems I have. I don't think the puzzles are that interesting, or even if they are interesting, I feel like they're kind of mid. And yeah, I don't like the inspiration for the game at all as well. Now we have we'll talk about God of War 3, which has similar problems to the first God of War. It's just kind of new age. I don't like how this game looks versus like this one. I think this is peak of graphics for God of War, which we'll talk about this one specifically now because it kind of comes up. I think God of War the new age God of War looks ugly. I think it looks miserable. I don't think I'm actually like feeling the areas. I don't think I enjoy a lot of the character moments because I'm distracted by how bad the backgrounds are. Like they are in your face bad. Which at the end of the day, I think is the more important aspect to talk about a really bad game is how the background elements can just really, really take you out of it. Uh, and I feel like that's it. Haven't played Ragnarok yet. I'm I'm not looking forward to it honestly, based on this. GTA 4. I'll talk about San Andreas. I've been wanting to talk about GTA 4 for so long. Grand Theft Auto 4 is one of the greatest games of all time. One, you have fantastic characters. Two, you have some of the best driving that's been put into a game, uh, like in years and decades. And also at the same time, I feel like the keeping the same formula of the combat just to kind of update it a little bit was the correct maneuver. I think GTA 4's map is fantastic. I think the kind of character narrative is really, really sold well. And I feel like the player has urgency for Nico in this game. And I feel like not a lot of people talk about how great GTA 4 is. Like, when it comes to being the best Grand Theft Auto, which is a massive series that people are excited for, I I just don't understand how 4 doesn't get talked about more. We'll skip 5 for now. We'll talk about San Andreas. I think I think I'm gonna put in really bad. Part of me wants to put in bad, but we'll put really bad. It's just not iconic. I think San Andreas is one of the lamest games of the PS2 era. It's not very memorable. The first part of the game is just really, really lame. Like you meet all these characters that don't matter, and just you don't feel like there's actual like reason to be around. So yeah, I feel like it's a big problem with San Andreas is that it's just not iconic. It's not memorable. Like a lot of people talk about the greatest mission of all time being the train mission, and I feel like yeah, it's good, and it's worth mentioning, but I feel like it's just not iconic enough. It's not. I can't go to somebody random, right? Somebody random that maybe has touched a video game once in their life, and I can't say a line from San Andreas and have them be like, "Oh, that's San Andreas." I can't have that, which I feel like is its biggest problem, and it wants to be so badly. Also, not like removing hot coffee was definitely the worst decision Rockstar could have made, just hands down. Let's talk about GTA 5. Uh, it's really bad. When it comes to GTA 5, I think having the three characters basically have three different styles of missions is really problematic. One, we don't get the full scope of the character in any regard, so any kind of storytelling from their point of view is always going to be just not fleshed out. I don't like the side characters at all. I feel like they don't get their own character arcs. My favorite missions aren't brought up enough, which is the Trevor crane missions at the dock. I feel like that's really cool. I love the submarine. I think it's a fantastic vehicle, but it's just not in there enough. I think the heists are the lamest thing that Grand Theft Auto has ever done. Uh, I think it's super fucking lame, and I feel like it suffers from that because the focal point was the heist, and it's just really sad to see after Grand Theft Auto 4 how much of a turnaround was put on GTA 5, and I feel like it's such a problem. Guitar Hero 2, I think it's just bad. Um, I'm gonna take another drink. I've been taking a lot of drinks. Sorry about that. But Guitar Hero 2, I feel like has bad music in it, and its rhythm game stuff is not. It's just it's not on point. When you play a rhythm game, you want your inputs to be registered and on point. This has a ridiculous delay. I feel like a lot of the actual notes you're hitting don't match the music at all, which is the exact opposite of Guitar Hero 1, where I feel like it was on point the entire way. Hades, I don't like the art style at all. Uh, I hate the roguelike genre in general. I feel like it's just bad faith for a developer. Uh, I part of me wants to play it really bad. I'm just gonna play it bad. I feel like there is some stuff saving it. I feel like the general feeling you get at the end of Hades when you've kind of gone through an entire run, and you go back and you're excited to start at the beginning. I feel like that is very very good on Hades' part. Uh, Half Life, I really just want to say decent in general. Um, but that's mostly from a storytelling perspective. And I feel like, see, Half Life is always interesting because, like, looking at Half Life 2, like, I don't know if Half Life, I don't think the first one is here. Okay, this is cheating, but, so I think, like, Half Life has this huge problem where it's really hard for me to separate, like, the community's opinion versus the actual opinion, right? I always struggle with that in making my own opinion. So I feel like Half Life is just going to sit here. Halo Reach is one of the worst Halos to ever exist. I'm probably gonna play that really bad. When we talk about Halos, I think the best one's probably Halo 4, which somehow just didn't get here. And I feel like Reach, it, I'm glad they stepped away from Reach. I feel like Reach was too on the nose, and more importantly, just like too happy of a game for such a, like, what they were trying to tell with the story. I don't know what they were thinking. I don't know why a lot of people really like the multiplayer. I feel like it was shit, and it's just not worth it. Uh, we'll just put this in bad. I I don't want to talk about Halo all day, but uh, I yeah, we'll give this because I do think there's a few bits of the gameplay that are interesting in Halo 3. Specifically the assault rifles, I think are really like skill based. But at the same time, I want to talk about probably the build up for Halo 3. I've skipped a lot of build up of a lot of these games because they're really not important to how you view the game. I think Halo 3's build up though is part of its identity, whether you were there or not. And when it comes down to it, the build up for Halo 3 was the worst build up I've ever like been a part of in a video game. I feel like I would rather go through just what we're going through now with Elder Scrolls 6. I feel like that is the perfect way to do build up for any game at all. Is draw it out as much as possible, kind of extend the hype as much as possible, raise expectations for a decade. I feel like that's the way to go about it. Whereas Halo 3 was talking about ending the series and just it sucked. It sucked, and it's really disappointing. Hearthstone, haven't played it. This is the orange box. It's really hard for me to establish how bad this is because one, we have Half-Life, which we've already kind of talked about how I suffer from not being able to form my own opinion a lot. So I feel like it's really hard for me to just rank it on TF2, which is one of the worst games of all time, just in general. It's not very fun. It's not very just like involved as a player. And I feel like Portal is some of the worst puzzle gaming you can ever be a part of. So part of me is actually just gonna put it in horrible. I want to put it a little higher and like give Half-Life some credit, but at the same time, like I think the other two just weigh it down. Horizon, whichever one is Zero Dawn, I have played. Is this Zero Dawn? This is Forbidden West. I have not played Forbidden West. I think this is one of the best games on this list. Uh, Fantastic open world. I feel really soft. If this is this Zero Dawn? No, this is West. It's really hard for me to determine these. Um, but that's because like that. Just look at the titles. Whatever. I feel like the open world really establishes itself well. I feel like the combat's very engaging. I love exploring different directions in the game, and I feel like the overall like expressiveness of a lot of the moments are just fantastic. That's all I'm gonna say. Inside, I have played. It's terrible art style. Um, I don't like its storytelling at all. It's not very involved. Terrible. Really bad co-op game. I played this with a friend, and we've been playing co-op games for a long, long time. And yeah, I feel like this game just doesn't have the great locales, doesn't have good characters, doesn't matter. Really terrible. Journey, probably one of the greatest games of all time. I'll put it in amazing. I feel like walking simulators are some of the best gaming you can ever be a part of, because it basically it's a journey, for lack of a better term. It's a journey to go on, and I feel like it really captures a hold of your attention, which is something we could say more of for, you know, hopefully one some of these games someday. Uh, do I want to say I technically have? So when it comes to Knights of the Old Republic, I'm thinking whether I'm putting in horrible. Nah, okay, we'll put in bad. Put in bad. I feel like the RPG mechanics are pretty weak. I feel like the stories are just not interesting. Yeah, I just weak as hell. Jade Empire was so much better. Just my god. Left 4 Dead 2. Uh, Probably just a bad zombie game. When it comes to multiplayer, I think it's some of the worst multiplayer you could be a part of. It's really shitty to play as like the Charger, the Smoker in multiplayer. Even the campaigns I feel like are pretty weak and don't stand out at all. Uh, and yeah, just that's kind of how I feel about Left 4 Dead 2. Uh, this is this Skyward Sword? It's really hard for me to actually tell. Uh, is it Skyward Sword or is that Twilight Princess? Uh, I have a big problem determining. I think this is Skyward Sword. If it's Skyward Sword, I'm probably gonna put it in bad. I think the motion controls are the best part of the game. With Skyward Sword, Twilight Princess would probably go right here, by the way, and really bad. But uh, and also I just feel like a lot of exploring areas was the best part, and that's it. Like one of my favorite parts of the game is when you load up the game and you collect any item, it kind of goes back and goes, "Hey, you collected this item." A really cool touch, and I feel like it's very important that it's there. We have a little bit. Why is this has to be Skyward Sword then? Whatever. But Little Big Planet, I think being able to create your own levels is cool, and that's basically it. Kind of just decent, nice little platformer. Uh, Madden 2004. I think we're gonna put this in very good to great. Yeah, I think when we talk about sports games, uh, this one is the best in just like establishing like how to play, the type of plays you should do, like learning football as like a sport. The announcers are on point all the time. Really, really cool stuff like that. Super Mario Bros. Wonder. I kind of want to say really bad or bad. It's kind of like in the same group as Celeste, where I feel like 2D platforming has just like died completely. Um, but I will give this. I feel like its art style is bad in general. I feel like everything about this is just a bad game. Mass Effect. Ooh, now we get to talk about some really interesting shit. So let's go into how I want to order this. We're gonna go really bad. We're gonna go horrible. And then we're gonna talk about probably very good or great. Let's go very good. Yeah, I think that's fine. Um, no, I think it's good. Very good, sure. But when it comes to Mass Effect 1, I feel like the foundation of. We're going to get into spoilers here. I feel like Sovereign's the worst part. He has terrible lines in the game. All the companions are very fucking lame. Like, I hate Garrus. Garrus is such an irritating companion to have. Uh, like, the worlds you visit are just very, very well, like, put together. And I do love fighting Geth all the time. I feel like having your main enemy be established in an alien focused game, be robots, is just really, really well done. And I feel like everything is explained super well to a point, but eventually it starts to fall apart as soon as the codex is put in. Because the codex is not a great information source at all. And my favorite side quest in the game being the keepers, going around and like uploading data to the keepers, is like kind of put on hold sometimes because the Citadel is like there's no signs that establish where you're going, which I feel like means there's always going to be like two keepers you miss. Um, Also, I really don't like in games like this when you're outside like a space station or whatever, and you end up like shooting away like their shield or their cover, and they just float off. One of the lamest effects in video games, which kind of goes to Mass Effect 2. Much more combat focused, which shows how bad of a game it is. I hate all the characters. I think Morden's terrible. I think Garrus, who returns, ooh, surprise, a really terrible time. I don't like Thane at all. I think Thane is one of the weakest characters ever put to paper into a video game. Really miserable. The side quests, the loyalty missions, whatever you want to call them, are awful. Liara as like the Shadow Broker focused DLC is also miserable. I honestly, Mass Effect 2 is just terrible. Mass Effect 3, the weakest part about it is the multiplayer. Multiplayer is just not rewarding, not fun. Don't play with your friends at all. Really terrible time, which goes into the ending. I do want to talk about Mass Effect 3 ending and why it's actually here. I feel like it was the perfect way to end a trilogy like that. It encapsulates everything right with the decision. I'm really glad it, more than likely, it was EA stepping in to kind of not cut off, but like kind of focus BioWare down, and give them plenty of time to really like be like, hey guys, you have such a like well liked series, whether it's good or not. We just kind of have to focus down and make a great ending, and I feel like BioWare really delivered there, which I think is really cool. I do like the game starting on Earth. I feel like it's very well established why you're there, and at the same time, when it comes to Mass Effect 3, I feel like it's just the perfect capstone to the series. Phantom Pain, probably really bad. Yeah, we'll give it bad. I think there's some stuff to it. Just the stealth is pretty mid. Uh, the characters, kind of the everything about it. One of my favorite parts about the Phantom Pain specifically is like how Konami kind of interfered with Kojima, because the reason I think it's so important that they interfered is I feel like Kojima, as shown with Death Stranding, uh, just can sometimes really not understand storytelling at all, and I feel like Konami did a great thing there. Metroid Dread, probably really bad. Again, I talked about 2D platformers suffering. This is a little different. I really don't think Metroid should ever be around anymore. I feel like it's an aged out series, and more importantly, its best game is probably back on the NES with just Metroid. So there you go. Again, we're talking about more Metal Gear, just terrible storytelling. The action sequences are pretty bad. I'll probably say Metal Gear Solid 3 is my least favorite here. Monster Hunter World. I kind of want to put really bad, because unlike earlier entries into, no, we'll put in bad. Unlike earlier entries in Monster Hunter, I feel like World doesn't actually teach the player anything, which, like, I also feel like this was the worst way to enter the game, which sucks, because I think that's how a lot of people got into Monster Hunter, was with World. That's not to say it's like completely worthless, but there's not a lot of interesting. The weapons were a step down in a lot of regards. Some of the monsters are just in general, like, locales don't work. Just overall, also too short of a game. Too short. Bioshock Infinite, probably one of the best games of all time. Yeah, we'll put it in amazing. I feel like do I need to say anything? You don't want to put it in masterpiece. I think this game is great. You see, now that I'm starting to look at this list, I've realized that like Game of the Year is really good at encapsulating like some really standout titles that I just I would love to see more of these. But we can't hit it all the time, right? We can't hit it all the time. Okami, this is horrible. I fucking hate this art style. I hate its art style. I hate its music. I hate its characters. Just terrible. I can't believe the sequel's being made. Overwatch, probably just bad. Hero shooters kind of suck in general. I did like 3 support meta when I played like casually or in ranked. I didn't get that good at it, but I did like having all supports. I think that was the best way. Persona 5, this is a really bad game. So Persona as a general series has always been bad. I don't understand this misconception with Persona being like a good series, or Shin Megami Tensei in general. being a good series. Persona 5 just doesn't have interesting characters, doesn't have interesting dungeons, doesn't have interesting mechanics, and it's just terrible. Portal 2, again, probably going with the Portal thing. Uh, some of the worst puzzles you can ever be a part of, and also the new mechanics that were added. Terrible way to kind of ruin what you were trying to go for. I didn't know you could get worse. I really didn't. Need another tier, honestly. But Psychonauts 2, sadly haven't played. Psychonauts 1, uh, I think is a decent to a good game. Really haven't played it. PUBG, one of the best battle royales that you can be a part of. Until you realize it's just decent. That's kind of it. I feel like the community itself is probably the best aspect of PUBG. I feel like they're pretty wholesome, and more importantly, don't like probably the most honest of all the player bases we'll ever talk about. Uh, I have not played this. I don't really care to. Uh, so we have the Red Deads. I want to talk about Redemption 1. I think it's just bad, and we're going to talk about Red Redemption 2, which is also just bad. So they have two different problems here. I think the combat's the best part of Red Dead Redemption 1. The storytelling, though, is just bad. It doesn't feel very fulfilling. The characters are haphazard at best, uh, and just the missions suck. Multiplayer is really good, though. Red Dead Redemption 2, on the other hand, looks awful. It just looks miserable. The dialogue and the character moments are miserable. The actual being a cowboy stuff. I do love when it fades to black though. That's really cool. I do love that. But there and the combat does hold together. I do love that the combat has made it almost 30 years. By the way, like that's insane. The same combat style, really really cool. Resident Evil 4, probably in really bad to bad. Oh, we'll put in bad. Resident Evil 2, we'll put really bad. Um, remake, I actually have not fully played the remake. I've gone a couple hours in, but we have Village. I'm trying to cover the Resident Evils here. We'll put that right there. Okay, cool. So let's talk about 4 because that was first. In this regard, not Resident Evil 2 remake, but whatever. I think more quick time events, more escorting, less interesting. Interesting. I say interesting in quotes here because it's not. They kind of pretend too much. And I don't think Leon's an interesting character. I don't think it's very survival horror trying to prevent yourself from dying. Not very cool. Which goes into Resident Evil 2 remake. I think this game looks bad. And it doesn't help that Resident Evil 2 originally is one of my least favorite games of all time. But yeah, it just struggles from too many problems. I really can't get into it. Village, it's cool to have kind of the early parts be as slow as it is, but the horror elements just aren't horrifying. Sekiro, combat is way too slow. Way too slow. I'm gonna put in bad though because I do like. No, we'll put in really bad. I think it's if there was an in between tier, it'd be there. But I think the bosses are pretty lame. I think the overall world design is terrible. Yeah, the Sekiro is just really bad. This is Shadow of Mordor. I think the Nemesis system is awful. But I do like the amount of collection side quests that are in the game. Really on point. Really on point. I do think some of the cutscenes are really cool. Talking to the ghost, I forget his name right now, which I'm gonna be lit on fire for it. But overall, it's just kind of a bad experience. I don't know what SOCOM that is, so I can't really say. Spider-Man, I have not played Spider-Man 2, so we'll ignore it. But we'll talk about Spider-Man. Some of the worst web swinging in a Spider-Man game. As somebody who's played a lot of Spider-Man, probably some of the worst. Don't like this rendition of Spider-Man in general. I don't like the customization in the game. A lot of the costumes feel very, very backhandedness, is how I would put it. I don't like a lot of the other side characters. Dr. Octopus was done very poorly. Who else? There's so much into this, but SSX3, some of the worst sports gaming you can be a part of. I feel like the maps are lame, the secrets are lame, the writers themselves don't have a personality, the music is very, very troublesome. Just overall, not a great time. Never played that. Stray, never played. 3D World, good? No, we'll say decent. I feel like when we talk about 2D platformers, I feel like the biggest issue is that we're past 2D. Like we're ultimately past. There's no reason to go back. It killed the genre. Call it a day. And I feel like 3D World is being like, okay, we understand that 2D is aged out and should never be a thing. Let's mix it with 3D World. Super Mario Maker making your own levels is really fucking lame, just in general. Like nobody has ever wanted to play a game and then make a level of their own. Really, really stupid concept. Odyssey. I feel like a lot of the kingdoms just suffer from being not fleshed out. There's not a lot of content in Odyssey. That's kind of the biggest negative of it. And I, yeah, I honestly, there's just not a lot of content to talk about. Super Smash Bros. Ultimate, probably in really bad, but I'll give bad the benefit of the doubt because I do love that a lot of characters share the same kind of neutral uh, aerial attacks. I feel like it makes it feel like they're encapsulating everything from the source material as possible. But the biggest problem I have with Ultimate is not enough characters. I feel like it's just too low. Having all the stages back is great and all, but when when you don't like actually make the stages feel like fleshed out to a newer age or even brought forth, it feels very problematic. DLC like is really fun to play against, and I wish we had more characters like that. I will say that. I have not played the Splinter Cell. Oblivion, small game. Uh, yeah, I kind of just kind of small game, not interesting side quests. The characters are. I feel like I'm just restating a lot of stuff here. Man, Skyrim, fucking terrible game. Probably here. I feel like there's no reason to play this game in any regard. I don't understand how people can really enjoy it's just it's a waste of time game in the worst way possible. Breath of the Wild, probably amazing. I feel like the open world is fully fleshed out. I feel like the dungeons are the best part of this game. The dungeons are like super super well done, and at the same time, I think encapsulate the best part of uh, of Zelda. Like dungeons are so important when you make them important. I feel like it's always kind of the thing where you look at Ocarina of Time, which is one of the worst games of all time, and it's just like the Water Temple ruins it, right? And so you don't want more dungeons like that. And I feel like Breath of the Wild does a great job on that. Tears of the Kingdom, I technically have only played like 3 hours. We'll give it a thing. Horrible. Hate this art style. Hate the world. Hate everything about Wind Waker. Fuck that game. Outer Worlds, probably like decent, honestly. I do love a lot of the political messaging in it. Uh, I love being punched in the face with stuff like that. I think it really gets the point across, especially for someone dense like me. So we have The Walking Dead. Storytelling wise, really lame. Um, I hate almost every single part of it, but it does get some bits with the memes, right? I think the memes are really good. Titanfall 2, bad. I'm tempted to put in really bad, but we'll put in bad. Single player is awful. There's no reason to ever play it, and the multiplayer is just not fleshed out at all. This is probably up here and very good. I feel like this is showcasing how good is The Last of Us right here. Yeah, here it is. But I feel like this is showcasing how good The Last of Us 1 could have been, and at the same time being a very important talking point for decades to come. I love talking about this game in general. I think part 2 is good. The new Age Tomb Raider, I think it's not bad. I don't like one of the things I do like about the game before I get into the bad stuff is I do love the kind of non-focus of tombs early on. In general, it does become a bit of a problem in the late game, which is kind of the struggle of the late game. I think the hunting mechanic is pretty weak. I think the story is just terrible. I think everything about it is just kind of a mixed bag, and I feel like it the tomb stuff being kind of Tomb Raider, feel like it could have been done a little better. Underground, I have played. I'm surprised this is here. Uncharted in general, we're just gonna cover this really quick because they're all in the same group. Uncharted really just happens to be like a really bad series, just in general. Like I, it amazes me. Underground, probably just decent. More skating, always a fun time. Vice City, one of the worst games of all time. I can't believe that, like, when we talked about Grand Theft Auto, I talked about like four, right? I talked about how amazing four was, and I feel like people just always bring Vice City up when it's like such a bad. Missions aren't interesting, characters aren't interesting, the the world itself is uninteresting, the art style just terrible. Uh, Witcher 3, I think the game's too easy. I think that's kind of the big problem I have with it. Too easy. Uh, I don't have an interest in Witcher at all. The world itself is boring. Yeah, World of Warcraft, probably decent. It's an MMO. It does that. Xenoblade Chronicles 3. I'm really thinking here. I'm going to put in great, which I think might be a little too high. I probably should put in very good. But I just ultimately love more Xenoblade. I think that's kind of the thing. I feel like Xenoblade Chronicles, Xenoblade 1. I don't know why I'm stating the Chronicles again, but Xenoblade 1 really showcased that this could be a fantastic series and you should release more and more and more and more and more. And I One of the biggest problems is that 3 just isn't enough. I need like a Xenoblade Chronicles 5 at this point. And I think that encapsulates it all. I think I did a fantastic job of not only explaining why they deserve to be where they are, but also showcasing that the game of the year can showcase some very good games, some fantastic. Some of these are just nominees in general, and I feel like it's good. Uh, and I feel like it's very fair to have a loaded back end like this because it's keeping me honest, and it's not like one having this many like just showcasing that a lot of these games are bad is very important because negativity is the best part of video game communities. Like being negative and being just like the person to point out obvious shit. I think that's very important. But I think this is good. What is your favorite video game on this list, and why is your opinion, if it's in horrible or really bad, wrong? So yeah, I do want to say this. If you do love these top 9 here, or we'll even give this a top 11, if you do like it, hey, talk about it. I love talking about all these games. I feel like it's always Christmas when I get to talk about these. So yeah, some of these I kind of skipped over as much as possible because I think we're at an hour, which is kind of ridiculous. But yeah, fantastic time. Have a good day, and I'll catch you later.